Boo! Halloween season. Spooky. Anyways, we're here. As you can hear, Jackson in the background. Maybe it was Grant. Maybe you don't know. Anyways, we're here. Weekly tiers have arrived, and bada bing, bada boom. It's a slideshow walking into your room. Moving forward, we have the players that you should like, hopefully. Smash. If you're dressing up as a Hulk, you'll probably like these guys. All right, so the smashes for this week: Saquon, Swift, Kyron from the tier 1 guys. Saquon, I just don't think it's really too crazy to explain that the guy who's basically getting Christian McCaffrey-like usage, that got goal line touchdown, vultured him 3 times last week, is probably in for another good week here against the Jacksonville Jaguars that are just missing a lot of their options. But DeAndre Swift, Kyron Williams, explain why they are smashes.
Yeah, Arizona's just a weak defense. It feels like a spot where the Bears defense was a little clunky last week, and you can kind of get things going to start off with the run game. And if you can build a solid foundation around that, then the pass game and everything will kind of follow with it. This game should be relatively close. There's no game script issues. If anything, I feel like the Bears could be up somewhat, and you could see Swift getting even more work. But I think in any sort of tight game at all, Swift's going to get a ton of carries. He's been great the last 4 or 5 weeks, so feels like a great spot to add on to that.
Yeah, I feel like Kyron has pretty much established himself as someone who belongs in this smash column every week. He hasn't rushed for less than 75 yards since basically the beginning of the season, scored a touchdown in all 7 of his starts, going up against a Seattle defense that allows almost 150 rushing yards per week, pretty much the bottom of the NFL. So it should be just another straightforward smash spot for Kyron here.
Right on. All right, on to the next one. So we have Drake London, Amon St. Brown, and A.J. Brown. So I want the other side of the receiving options here. I thought about putting CeeDee Lamb after his great game, but I was like, you know what? Bounce back spot for Drake London, highest projected scoring game. Don't overthink it. Amon-Ra and A.J. Brown, what should we like about them respectively?
I just feel like in the past when Amon-Ra's had a down game or less targets, they usually try to feed him early and often to kind of get him going. And last week, I believe he only had 1 catch. He did score a touchdown on that catch. But this feels like a situation where they're going to force feed him early, get him going. Obviously, Jair Alexander is a factor in this situation, but Amon-Ra's had success against him in the past, and I feel like they're going to come out with a clear game plan in this one.
Yeah, for A.J. Brown, I think his projection we're getting is benefiting from him having his lowest fantasy output of the year last week. This week, I think he should bounce back big. He's going up against the Jaguars' 31st ranked pass defense. They allow 270 receiving yards a game. They play a man-heavy defense. I think this is a big smash spot for A.J. Brown.
I like it. All right. On to the next one here. We have the tight ends. So a little bit contrarian for me here. I'm not going to lie with Trey McBride, but we also have Kelsey and Laporta on the board. But the reason I like it is because I'm a little bit of a nerd. They're not partnered with us, but I do think that some of the best analytics in the space are acquired by Fantasy Points data. And they basically pointed out that this is a good spot schematically for McBride and Marv. So I will be taking shots on them respectively. But why should we like the legend Travis Kelsey and what we thought was going to be the legend of Sam Laporta?
The Buccaneers' defense against tight ends just hasn't been very good this season. The game script could be a little worrying on this Monday night game, I guess, but it feels like a spot where Kelsey kind of got things figured out last week, and I feel like they build upon that. The DeAndre Hopkins factor is something to be aware of as well. I feel like he's probably going to get more and more involved in this offense as time goes, but Kelsey is going to be the clear number 1 receiving option going forward. I think the fears people had about Xavier Worthy and now DeAndre Hopkins and stuff are a little overblown, and I feel like Kelsey's going to continue his production going forward.
Yeah, with Laporta, obviously has not had the volume or production that we've kind of wanted throughout the whole season. But we did see in the first leg of Jameson Williams' 2-game suspension, him catch all of his targets, 6 of them for 48 yards and a touchdown. That was National Tight Ends Day, but we got another week without Jameson here. Packers D is pretty soft against tight ends. I'm liking another Sam Laporta spot here.
I like it. On to the next one. Where do we slightly stand / the mid-tiers? So I was kind of the more greedy one and went with a higher tiered projected running back. I just love Achon in this spot. Just should know. But White and Brown, why should we like those two respectively here?
Yeah, Rashad just kind of had a resurgence back into relevancy in fantasy after the receivers went down. He's even lining up out wide on some snaps, but even if he's lined up kind of under center or around Baker Mayfield in the backfield, I feel like he's going to run a lot of routes. This should be a game where the pass game is flying. It feels like a situation where they're probably going to be down a significant amount if the Chiefs offense can be competent in this one. So you're going to be throwing the ball a lot. Rashad's going to be in on most of those game situations. He's going to be running his curl routes, his Texas routes. He should be able to feast against this Chiefs defense with a positive game script.
I like it.
Yeah, Chase Brown, I like his projection here of a little under 13.5. He has gone over 11.5 PPR points in 4 of his last 5 games, and those were against some pretty tough matchups. And you could argue that it was kind of touchdown dependent. Scored against the Ravens in week 5, Eagles in week 8, but Vegas is probably going to be one of the easiest opponents he faces for the rest of the season. I think this is a great spot for Chase to exceed expectations.
I like it. I like it a lot. On to the next one, the receivers, the mid-tiers. So I did follow the theme here and chose somebody a little bit more in that range. For what it's worth, absolutely obsessed with Olave this week. Should be a great spot for him.
I like that.
But I like Josh Downs. He just seems to kind of usurp Michael Pittman at this point. Albeit I'm not really sold this is going to be the best matchup for them because Vikings defense has been phenomenal this year. But we'll see. But why should we like Khalil Shakir and Zebra?
I think the Vikings are probably going to blitz Flacco a ton, which is a little worrying for your situation as well. But I am high on Josh Downs. Khalil Shakir, which feels like he's been a target monster since Amari came over, which is kind of what I foresaw happening. It just feels like a situation where when you bring in another guy to kind of take away some of the heat, you can kind of find yourself in more favorable positions. He's running a ton of kind of underneath routes. His quality of target isn't crazy, but he's hovering around that 9-10 region a lot. Feels like Jalen Ramsey will probably be worrying about Amari Cooper during most of his reps, or the guys on the outside like Keon Coleman and Shakir out of the slot can kind of get a lot of work underneath. This feels like a situation where the Bills will put up a ton of points. They looked great against the Dolphins last time. They ran the ball all over them. I feel like the Dolphins will probably make some corrections to make sure that doesn't happen again and leave some room for the pass game.
Yeah, Leggett is my pick for this middle tier. Obviously, we know Deontay Johnson is out of there. So he has an opening here to maybe take over at the wide receiver 1 spot for the Panthers. The yardage has been pretty underwhelming throughout the season so far for Leggett. However, he does have 3 touchdowns in his last 5 games. Panthers have a really bad defense, so that should probably force them into a pass-heavy game script against the Saints. I like Leggett. Saints are also bottom 5 in yards allowed through the air this season.
Are you guys at all worried about Thielen coming back plus Bryce Young factor?
I just think the 32-year-old coming off of a hamstring injury, like, is just something that they're going to be like, we're not going to push them for one, and they kind of know. Like, I wouldn't say they know the season's lost because you have Canales being like, we're going to be good, I swear. And it's just like, no, you're not. So it's like, I like Jackson's pick with Leggett here just as well because it's like you're taking the shots on the rookies because at this point, you know the season's lost. You know they're going to be getting a top-tier draft pick. Maybe, just maybe, like one of these 2 guys, the guy that was drafted in the first round or like the analytical guy that's doing well, hopefully emerges down the stretch here. Because like a dynasty thing that I've learned, there was an old article on it, but basically you want a receiver to have, I think it's like 35, 37 yards a game or something like that. The old rule used to be 525 yards, and that receiver basically had like a 97% chance to have somewhat relevancy in the NFL. And that's all we're hoping for here between these 2. But long message aside, to the tight ends. Taysom Hill. They are without Bub Means. They're without Rashid Shaheed. They're also likely going to be without Kendre Miller. As much as we're making a bull case for the receivers here, like this Panther squad sucks. And they're bad against tight ends. They're bad against the run game. And I can't see nothing better than a Swiss Army knife here. But why should we like Cade Otton and Dalton Schultz? I do like the Dalton Schultz play specifically a lot today. I think he's a very nice edge.
I mean, Cade Otton just looked like a god last week. It feels like the
Agreed.
target share is going to continue.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, new Gronk.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the receiving options that we've seen get picked up on waivers from Tampa the last couple weeks. I think we'll probably get more into the swing of things as they're getting used to playing that level of snaps, like a Jalen McMillan or Trey Palmer. So it feels like his role might decrease a little bit, but I mean, he got so many targets last week, scored 2 touchdowns, was involved in the game outside of the touchdowns. Even without them, he would have had a solid week. So he doesn't seem super touchdown dependent. And like I said with Rashad, it just feels like a positive game script, throwing the ball a lot. That's kind of been their MO this season. So, and the Chiefs' run D is so good that it's going to be hard to force it there. So this feels like the route.
Yeah, I like this spot for Dalton Schultz. We know that the Texans receivers are injured. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs are out. So it's going to be pretty much him and Tank Dell leading the passing attack this week. He has a better matchup here than Dell will. The Jets secondary is pretty good against wideouts. They're a little bit softer on tight ends. Schultz was really good when all these guys were injured last season. Scored over 9 fantasy points in 5 out of 6 games and scored 14 or more twice. So good smash spot here.
All right, on to the next one. We have where we're standing completely against the crew. So running backs. I want to go with Keaton Mitchell here. Guy practiced in full today. And if my memory serves correctly, they should be massive favorites here against the Denver Broncos. And I just have a very hard time believing that they're going to just be like, Derrick Henry, garbage time, run it over. Like another 7 touchdowns for you. At this point, like I feel like they're like, all right, we have a very electric rookie who's now practicing in full again. Like, let's give him some run on the back end here. Let Derrick Henry save his legs for the playoffs. And I think that's something you are going to be seeing a lot more of. But that's just me kind of propagating. But why should we like Tyler Algier and Austin Eckler?
I just think Algier is in a good spot against a Cowboys run defense that really struggles between the tackles on kind of up the middle runs. And Tyler Algier is going to be the guy that's handling the workload for most of that type of stuff. It's really random how he gets used. It seems like there's like a drive or two a game where he just takes every carry on a drive, which is kind of an interesting way to split up the backfield. Normally you'd see kind of working in on different downs on the same drive, but I expect him to be a ball carrier or a bell cow on a few drives during this one, and he'll probably find his way into the end zone. He tends to find his way there for some vulture work as well. So I feel like Algier should smash against a Cowboys run defense that's really struggled all year.
I like it.
Yeah, I like Eckler here. He actually has had a pretty high snap share through the last 2 games, played 49% of snaps, averaging 7.5 touches. They're going up against the Giants, who they have the highest missed tackle rate, 6th most rushing yards per game allowed in the NFL. Eckler has been averaging 7.5 carries per game through the last 2, so I think he could probably flirt with around 10 carries this game, considering he has seen that increased snap share. So I kind of like this as maybe a fringe flex option or maybe a PredictionStrike investment. I think he could find his way into the end zone. He has 13 red zone touches on the season. So
I like it. All right. On to the next one here, we have the receivers. So I'm taking the other side of the coin that Jackson has here with the lower capital, just decent metrics. Would always encourage you to follow capital, though. It tends to be more predictive. Jordan Addison and Elijah Moore, why should we like them? They both look like they're good spots, I will mention.
It seems like when these receivers post some dumb stuff on their Instagram, it actually works, and they tend to actually get more work. It feels like you would reward the opposite behavior, but it seems to actually work in their favor. He's been relatively uninvolved in the last few weeks. And I feel like this is a situation where you can kind of force him the ball a little bit early and kind of get him going or get his head back kind of into the game, because it seemed like he was getting a little frustrated with his role there for a while. So this just feels like a situation against a Colts secondary that's nothing to be super scared of, where you can kind of force Addison the ball early and often and get him going. Maybe a deep ball.
Yeah, I like Elijah Moore here. I think it's a little bit contrarian just because the Browns that actually found their way into the end zone last week were Cedric Tillman and Njoku. But he actually led the team in target share. He led the team in slot snaps, yards per route run. So Winston was definitely trying to find him. He was his most targeted player. I think the Browns are open after his last performance to let Winston work kind of with a green light through the air. So I think his slot role, Elijah Moore's that is, should work out well for him. Maybe find his way into the end zone within the next 1 or 2 games.
I like it. And Grant didn't have one because realistically, these are just we're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
The guy I was looking for.
Yeah, it's so gross down here. The only reason I have some interest in Mike Gesicki is because if there's no T. Higgins, he seems to be getting a boost. Yeah, that's all I got. Noah Fant, why should we like him?
Pretty much just because the Rams have been struggling against tight ends recently. Tucker Kraft had 25-point-something fantasy points. Brock Bowers had 19. Josh Oliver scored a touchdown against them. They allow the third most fantasy points to tight ends. So I think this is going to be a high-scoring one between these two teams. Font has seen a bit more consistent usage. He had more than 60 yards in each of his last 3 games. So I think this is a fine spot for Noah Font.
Yeah, the thing I would add is I feel like without DK and potentially without Lockett as well, they're just missing targets, and he's a guy that can step in and his snap share is increased. This game also just feels like it has all the makings of a shootout. The Rams offense was clicking against a better defense in the Vikings and seemingly was scoring at will at times. And the Seahawks offenses look like that a lot during this season as well. So it feels like a situation where you can kind of just play a super high scoring game and they're going to be throwing the ball all over the field and it's going to have to go to somebody. And Fant feels like a reliable option to either have a lot of volume in the lead up or score a touchdown and have a solid game.
Yeah.
I like it. But yeah, not really much else to be said here. That's about it. Until next time, make sure you subscribe, invest accordingly, and of course, if this helps your fantasy lineups, start accordingly. Until next time, peace, y'all, and talk to you later.
Peace.